In an earlier video, I listed many of the taxonomic traits identifying humans as primates. In another video, I also explained why we're more specifically classified as a species of apes. But I deliberately omitted an intermediate stage between those two apparent levels because it's one that evokes so much resistance. It really requires a separate discussion just for that one grade alone. Now, no one argues whether we're vertebrates or placental mammals, even though that also means we're animals. The fact that we're apes can now be verified just as easily. For a while, most people thought the word ape referred only to extant, non-human pongans, also known as great apes. There was no consideration given to lesser apes, nor any of the many ancient apes we kept finding fossils for. Mainstream science sources are just now starting to realize that the word ape means a lot more than just chimpanzees, gorillas, and orangutans, and that it includes a few extinct hominids that are more humanoid than any of these. So there was a problem with our old method of classification, and it had to be fixed. Over the last 250 years, we've kept patching up the old 7-layer system by adding a suborder, infraorder, superfamily, subgenus, and so on, till we can't even tell how to rank the labels anymore. That's when we figured out there are no ranks, so we dropped the labels and found a new system, one that isn't so arbitrary. See, the problem with Linnaean taxonomy is that some of it is subjective. It's usually based on morphological similarity and sometimes on opinion. There's often no way to prove whether Linnaean classification was even correct because he didn't rely on the rigid set of rules that phylogenetics does. We used to say that men didn't default